Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lingo Ladies with your host. That would be me, Louise. As some of you know, I've worked as a teacher for about a year now, and I just started working with students who are multilinguals. And that is very fitting since today's topic is multilingualism. As per usual, I have two very interesting guests with me today, and they're going to help me with some of the terms, challenges, and how to work with multilingualism. So please introduce yourselves.
Hello, my name is Pelda Green. I have worked as a teacher for 10 years now, and I work with students from upper secondary school.
And I am Marianne Chamual. I am also a teacher. I have been working for 8 years, and I also have experiences with working in multilingual spaces.
So you're going to be my experts for the day and kind of help me out in these waters that I have not treaded yet.
Yes.
So first of all, maybe we should talk a little bit about multilingualism and what it is, because from what I gather, it is when a person can speak two or more languages. Would you say that's correct?
I think, yes, it's correct, but it depends. You can also say that a bilingual person speaks two languages, but a multilingual person can speak two languages at different varying degrees. So, for example, I speak Turkish and I speak Swedish, but I do speak Turkish rather with struggle sometimes. Swedish I am more confident in because I am more exposed to the Swedish language. So a multilingual person like me may speak two languages, but at different varying degrees.
Yeah, so exactly, as you say, Louise, multilingualism is basically the ability to be able to use two or more languages to, as Pelda said, varying degrees. So you can communicate in at least two languages, and you don't necessarily have to be native in those two languages. It's just that you need to be able to speak those languages.
And this is also, you could also put this in like communities as well, such as India, because they acknowledge like 23 languages in their country. So that would also mean one kind of multilingualism, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, we differentiate individuals, like multilingual individuals, like you have a multilingual identity, but we also have the communities, which are the multilingual communities. For example, India may be one country, but for example, we can have a continent or a country where they speak multiple languages, but we have the individual person that we sometimes focus more on because we can focus solely on the person, and as a teacher, we can try to help the student by focusing on their language area. And a student can have two languages. They can speak two languages. And as a teacher, you can try to help them by fully exploring their linguistic knowledge and skills.
Yeah. Multilingualism is complex, as we can see. We have a couple of definitions, and I feel like they're not exactly... you couldn't exactly say per definition exactly what multilingualism is, but we have an idea, and as we could see now, that it varies from person to person.
Yeah, because some lean on proficiency and some on how language is used. And some people find that a person who uses two or more languages daily is in fact multilingual. But maybe for simplicity reasons, we can talk about multilingualism as someone who can use two or more languages. We don't have to specify it that much.
Yes, that is correct.
So who would you say is a multilingual?
I would consider myself a multilingual person because I speak three languages. As I mentioned, at varying degrees. I speak English and Swedish as my two main languages, and Turkish I would consider my third language, mainly because I'm more exposed to English in school and Swedish in my daily life. I would consider Swedish being my first language because I do feel more comfortable speaking Swedish most of the time. However, in academic terms, I am very confident in my English. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's a bit confusing to decipher between my first language, because sometimes I consider English being my first language. Even if I do live in Sweden with Sweden as a first language, I do consider English as my first language sometimes when I am speaking inside the classroom. And when I am exposed to more English than I am exposed to Swedish. So that's why it's so hard for me to sometimes say that Swedish is my first language or that English is my first language. That's why I just say that I am a multilingual person who speak different languages at different levels.
Yeah. Louise, do you feel like you're multilingual?
Well, now that you've explained it so well, I would say, since I am quite fluent in both English and Swedish, so I guess I could write in my resume that I am a multilingual.
Yeah.
And so would you, right?
I mean, per definition, all three of us are multilingualist, I think you say.
So we could call ourselves multi-competent.
Yeah.
Is that right?
What languages do you guys speak?
I speak mainly Swedish and English in academic situations and contexts, as such as Pelda and also Louise, I think. And my mother tongue is, of course, Arabic, which I don't use that much, and that's the language that I'm kind of weaker in, I would say. But I think, I mean, all of us at least speak Swedish and English, so you could define us as multilingual.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I want to ask you a little bit about work, since I'm always looking for, tips and tricks on how to use my competence in my work. So what would you say is a good way to use multilingualism as a resource in the education? And what does it mean?
I feel like the most important thing for us as teachers to know is that we need to allow and give space for multilingualism. We need to allow our students to feel comfortable to speak different languages in the classroom. And we also need to kind of avoid separating the languages and telling them that you're not allowed to speak your mother tongue, for example, in the classroom, because we know, and also research shows, that when using your pre-existing languages that you already know to learn a new language, it's much easier for you to kind of adapt and learn the new language.
So you would kind of say that we need to soften the boundaries between languages, like allowing students to use their full linguistic repertoires.
I think it depends. Sometimes when students write in their notebooks, for example, I think it's very helpful for them to write in their native language, whether that be Spanish or Swedish, Turkish, Arabic, and then translating that to English can help them understand the English passage easier because they already have it delivered in their native language, which might be the language they feel most comfortable expressing themselves in. So in situations where they have to speak or write in their notebook to help themselves to understand a concept better, I think it's an asset inside of the classroom when they can use their native language.
Their native language is definitely an asset in the classroom.
So perhaps this is something to do with, I read about something called
acid-based teaching.
Acid-based teaching.
Exactly.
Yeah. So would you say that it would work, and how would it work in English education in Sweden?
So what acid-based focus means is that we as teachers work with our students' strengths and differences as resources in the classroom to reach our goals as basically a community in the classroom. So you take your students' strength. For example, this could be that they are good at maybe translating something to their friend in another language, and you focus on giving them the space to kind of work on this so that they could strengthen their linguistic competence?
I think that their native language can be used as an asset inside the classroom when they have a struggle describing a certain sentence. And sometimes you can use our body language to describe something. We can use pictures, illustrations to support us, to help us describe something. But when that is not enough, I think the native language can be a supportive system to help the student get their message across. For example, when I speak to my parents, I might translate some words to Turkish, but in my mind, it's still all in Swedish. And sometimes I do need to speak certain words in Swedish to just get my message across. And thankfully, my parents do understand Swedish as well. But if that's not the case, then we also have to sort of have a lexicon in the classroom so that we can help the students translate certain words so that they fully can get their message across, to get the help they need, and deliver their speech if they want to.
Yeah. Well, okay, I think I understand it better now. Because when I've been doing when I've been trying to work in this fashion, I've found that it relaxes the educational setting when the students are able to help themselves with words from different languages. So, as you guys have said as well, I find it easier to find words in English sometimes, even though Swedish is my mother tongue. And if you, as a teacher, work linguistically and culturally responsive teaching, which is when you use learners' cultural, linguistic, and historical resources to create an inclusive, stimulating, and relevant education, and of course, catering to different cultural identities and their experience, it could be a great asset in the classroom, and the learning becomes kind of more personal.
Exactly. It's vital to have the opportunity to speak your native language in the classroom. And also by giving our students the freedom to speak their native language in the L2 classroom, we kind of allow them to feel comfortable to speak with their peers and to basically work together more efficiently.
For example, if I struggle to speak in English, and if I am not allowed to speak my native language, I will most likely be quiet the entire time. I mean, there will be no interaction between me and my peers. So the main goal here is to interact the student. We want the students to feel a bit challenged, but we also want the material and the info to be comprehensible. We just want the best for the students, and that is why we want to allow the native speaker inside the classroom and the native language inside the classroom. Just in order to help them feel more comfortable, make them feel more included. When you and your culture is included in the material and in the planning, you can allow the students to actually express themselves as well in their native tongue.
So this kind of brings me into my next question, which is like pedagogical translanguaging. Pedagogical languaging.
Yep.
To like embrace the students' full linguistic knowledge. How do you guys work with that?
So the meaning of pedagogical translanguaging and why we work with it is kind of a strategy to get the students to be engaged in their linguistic repertoires. So for example, you could ask your students to explain the way that they're thinking in different languages, or ask them to explain to each other, their peers in different languages, of about what they're working with, for example. So the main thing we want to do when working with the translanguaging in the classroom is to kind of increase their metalinguistic awareness, and to get their brains going in the linguistic area.
Okay. But like, sometimes I hear people talking about the difficulties when speaking of languages in terms of like first, second, and third language. I mean, we've all done it right now. But like, why is it difficult in a multilingual setting?
I think it depends on each person. As I mentioned before, every person has their own definition of what a first language is, what their own first language is, and their native language might not be Swedish. It might not be English, for example. And when we have a diverse classroom with multiple identities, it's pretty difficult to say that everyone's native language, first language here is Swedish. We're not fully sure about that. Ska vi lägga till den här grejen också?
Well, from my understanding, languages don't like stand alone. They intertwine and connect, which is basically what we've said. Like we push in words from other languages when we speak. So it's like languages are, well, it's abstract almost because you use all of them at the same time. And I mean, multilingual people often use code switching and translanguaging.
Yeah, so that's exactly what you said now. That's basically, you almost described translanguaging, which is what is important to have in mind, especially as a teacher, that the students need to be able to use their linguistic features to kind of complete meaning or create meaning. So, for example, how one could use translanguaging is when a student reads an article in, say, English, but they think and they register the information that they're getting from the article in their mother tongue, for example. So if I would read an article in English, I would maybe register the information in Swedish in my head, and then I would maybe tell my mom about this article in Arabic. So that's one way we want to encourage our students to work with translanguaging.
Yeah, I agree with the topic with Louise that languages are intertwined and mixed, because when I was learning language, I was not learning only English. I was not only learning Swedish. I was learning multiple languages at the same time. And sometimes these grammatical structures and the vocabulary can get a bit mixed up. And as Marianne also mentioned, sometimes when I speak English, for example, I do think of Swedish words in my head that I directly translate to the students in English, but in my mind it's in Swedish. So that's why it's so difficult to say that I only use one language. That's very impossible for me. I usually use two languages at once, and that happens most of the time.
So why would you say that it's important to use translanguaging?
Mainly the factor of empowerment, because through using translanguaging, we can recognize and value the linguistic and cultural resources of these multilingualist or multilingual individuals, which are, in this case, our students. And we can also reflect upon and also see how people use their languages in diverse contexts and in different ways.
Okay, so how do you work? Like in the classroom, like what materials would you use, for example?
For me, I usually pick out interesting topics that resonate with the students' backgrounds or their cultures, because I do want to make them feel included. I want a diverse classroom to I want the students to learn from each other, from their own cultures, and learn from each other. And I also want the material to be sort of challenging at the same time that it's comprehensible, because if it's too easy, they will not be that challenged. They will not learn more. I want them to learn more. And I usually also include pictures and illustrations with text, because sometimes I recognize that some students need the support of pictures to understand a concept. For example, if I see a picture of a little girl sipping coffee, I will understand that, oh, this girl is sipping coffee. And if this picture is supported with text, then I will most likely remember that, oh, so this means that a little girl is drinking coffee in English. Oh, okay, nice. I will remember this till next time.
So basically what you're describing is an asset-based focus in the practice. As I mentioned earlier, it's when you take the strengths and differences of your students and kind of use them as resources, and kind of choose your material wisely from your students' identities.
Exactly. And I also try to include tasks that require many skills. So not always include listening tests, but always try to have diverse type of skills in each and every task. So for example, we can have reading and listening in the same task, or we can have different types of skills that take place in one task so that the students do not feel bored, and that they always feel a little bit challenged, so that they can feel a bit more motivated to learn more. Because, for example, when I was a student, I didn't feel very motivated by always repeating the same type of tasks and repeating things that I already know, that are things that I'm already aware of. So I think as a teacher, it's most important to create tasks that inspire students and create varying tasks.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the students should be exposed to input that is understandable, but also slightly beyond the learner's current language capacity. So they might not understand all the words, but they understand the general sense of what is said, and that the input must be compelling. So we kind of must make the students forget that we're speaking another language.
Precisely.
And engage the students to the point where the effort of improve disappears, and the focus is instead on what the theme or topic is, and that creates like an interest instead, perhaps.
Precisely. As you mentioned, when a topic is very interesting, the students tend to forget that they are learning a new language. And if it's so interesting, like when you're reading a book, for example, you sometimes forget that you have to read 400 pages of a book. You're just so immersed in reading that you forget that it's challenging sometimes, and you want to keep learning. Maybe you come across a word that is very difficult to understand. Then maybe you want to look that word up, and then you learn a new language in the process of reading. So immersive tasks will also increase the learner's fluency and their learning.
The main thing I would say for you, Luis, as a new teacher, is to think about the practice of LCR. I think it's called linguistically and culturally responsive teaching, which is basically you use the students' cultural and historical and linguistic resources.
Is this like identity text?
It could be, yeah, exactly. So the teaching should be inclusive and stimulating for the students, and to make it kind of inclusive, you use their experiences, both cultural and historical and linguistic, to kind of empower them to become lifelong learners.
Yeah, because I've been doing some work with the identity text. It's like, so it's constructed by the students that are multilingual, and they're reminded of their culture and their background. So, for example, they can design an identity poster about themselves or a family member, or create a book about their experiences in the new country, or like stuff that revolves around them as people and their culture and their language. And I mean, this can be done in so many different ways. It can be sung, written, it could be some kind of visual, spoken, or like dramatic. Perhaps put up a little theater. That would be very, very funny.
I would just like to add on the last thing you said is I feel like you're on a good way to creating a multilingual space when working with these identity texts. I mean, you're really giving the students' resources a place in the classroom, and where they could be uplifted and kind of appreciated and worked with, and I feel like that sparks interest. So I would say you're on the good road, basically.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Pelda, and thank you, Marianne. And as always, if it's your birthday, happy birthday. Have a nice day, and I'll see you later.
Bye bye.
Those 6
Thank you for
minutes.
having us.